Good morning, everybody. It is great to be with you this morning. One of the cool things that we are doing this as a congregation right now is we're giving away Bibles. So if you don't have a Bible, they're in the back. We have one of these Bibles or even some others lying around the church. If you need one or you know somebody who needs one, please pick that up. You'll also find these bookmarks. We're up to 3. I forgot to grab one myself this morning, but I'm kind of proud of the way they look. I think they look pretty good. They kind of cover what we're doing currently, and my goal in this series is to help you get to know Jesus and help you to then share what you know about Jesus with others. So we're in a chain reference study, so if you don't like writing in your Bibles, this is your solution. There's also some questions on the back of there that kind of helps to put all that in perspective and help those things to work together. So that's where we're at this morning. The issue of compassion. The issue of compassion. We looked at this a little bit in our class this morning. Compassion is to meet people in their affliction. It's a hard lesson to learn. It's a lesson that I have been seeking to learn better and more for many years. And I don't know that I'm there, but I think I've come a long way. When I first met my wife, we were in the Adventures in Missions program. She sat on the other side of the table. She came in one class day with a interlinear concordance Bible, Greek, Hebrew, as big as she was. I don't know how she got it down the stairs. And I was on the other side of the classroom with my pens all laid out, ready to mark and bleed all over my Bible, and trying to figure out all the different color coordinations, because that's how my brain works. And Alyssa ended up having a hard time on the field. She had a lot of health issues that were going on, and we came back together and we got to know each other some more while we were in Sunset going through school, and I really fell in love with her heart for the Lord. Her knowledge of the scriptures challenged my own. She really pulls ahead when it comes to names. I'm really bad with names, whether it be biblical names or people in the pews. I'm really bad with names. She excels at that. But her health continued to challenge her, and I kind of came from a background where I thought I had the answers. I know how to fix this. And I came with all my solutions and all my advice and all my thoughts, and probably way too patient of her. She listened, and slowly I came to understand that it was not her fault that she was dealing with her health issues. And as I began to walk alongside her, and as I saw her heart for the Lord and her dream future, I fell more in love with her. But her body continued to fail her. One of the best stories is we were going through Greek, and Alyssa had missed several classes, and you could only miss 4 before you had to drop the course. And she had missed like 3 in a row. She missed 1 more, she had to drop the course. She was tutoring me, went in, aced all the tests that she had missed, then got sick again, had to drop the course, and continued to tutor me in Greek, despite the fact that she had never taken Greek. So she's just absolutely brilliant. But over time, as I've walked alongside her, as I've known her, I've had to join her in her pain and her suffering. And I've slowly, I think, begun to learn the lesson of compassion. To not just give advice and walk away, to not just think I have all the answers, to not necessarily to be able to fix it, but to simply be there in the pain, to be there in the suffering, and to learn the lessons it has to teach. Compassion is an interesting issue. And I think it is one that we all struggle with. In Sunset and in AIM, especially the younger of us who were there at Sunset, we're expected to move chairs and tables and serve and do all these active things. And those are held in very high regard. That spiritual service of sweat and tears and maybe a little bit of blood is held in very high regard. But there's a lot of other things in the kingdom that are also held in high regard, and sometimes we don't look as kindly on those. And learning to have compassion towards those who are hurting, towards those who are suffering, is a challenging question. As we've been in the series of looking at Jesus, kind of the big question we've been asking is, who is this? Who is this that the sea and the winds obey him? Who is this that walks among us? Who is this who the demons obey and flee? Who is this? We've also asked the question, can he help me? Does Jesus have the power and the ability to help me? Will the seas obey him and the demons obey him? Something that just a normal man is not able to do. So he seems to have the power. He seems to be more than just a man. But an important question I think we have to stop and ask is, does Jesus care? Does Jesus truly care about me? It's one thing to have the power. It's one thing to be present and be able to do something about the suffering of others. But does Jesus truly care about me and my suffering and the struggles of life that I am going through? Does Jesus care about that? Well, that's what I want us to ask this morning as we look at the text. We ended last week in Mark chapter 5, ending in verse 20. We're going to pick up our chain reference right there, starting in verse 21. And when Jesus had crossed over again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. And then there came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell down at his feet. And he implored Jesus earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands upon her, that she might be made well and live." And he went with him, and a great crowd followed him, a throng about him. One of the first questions as we get into the text is, what is a synagogue ruler? And maybe we even need to back up a little bit more and ask the question, what is a synagogue? Well, basically a synagogue is a local place of worship. Of course, there was the temple in Jerusalem where all the people went to sacrifice and to worship God. But the synagogue was the house, the place where the community would gather to hear the word proclaimed, to study it, to wrestle with the text, where the kids would come and gather throughout the week to learn the Torah. The synagogue was that place, and the ruler of the synagogue was responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of the building, and then the organization of all of those different activities therein. So he had a place of prominence, and he was seen as a man of righteousness, a man who was holy, a man who was entrusted with the responsibility of that building, that place, and all the activities that went in or were involved therein. He comes to Jesus with a problem, with a deep problem. He implores Jesus, "Will you please help me? My daughter is sick. Come and heal her." We've tried everything else. Nothing is working. She's at the point of death. I've heard that you can do miracles. I heard that you have the power. Do you care enough to come with me and help me? Jesus' response is simple. Yes, I'll go. And amongst this huge crowd, they began to make their way slowly through the streets towards this man's house, towards the synagogue, to this young girl, 12 years of age, who was at home, lying in bed, dying. No man can help her. She is at the mercy of her illness. And her father, despite what the political leaders at the time thought about Jesus, he comes and he implores Jesus, "Please help me." And Jesus, in an act of compassion, says, "Yeah, I'll go with you. I'll join you in that." And he begins to walk with him and to join him in that struggle. We continue our reading, starting in verse 25. "And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who was suffering much under many physicians. She had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather she grew worse. When she heard reports about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd, and she touched his garment. For she said, "If I touch even his garment, I will be made well." And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt that her body had been healed of its disease. This woman had been suffering for 12 years. Let's put ourselves in this woman's position. It's not just that she had been sick for 12 years. Not just that the thing that ailed her would have probably drained the energy out of her body as she was constantly anemic, as she was constantly dealing with this. On top of all of those things, as embarrassing as it was and as discomforted as it was, and as much as the doctors were unable to help, the most concerning thing about all of this is that she was ceremonially unclean in that society. As a result, she could not go to the synagogue. She could not go into the temple. She could not participate in regular life because she herself would make others unholy. We don't know anything about this woman's background outside of the fact that she had lived in suffering for 12 years. And based off of a basic understanding of physiology, we can guess and make some assumptions about maybe some of her earlier life. That maybe she was married at some point in time. Maybe that this had come out of a pregnancy, maybe a lost child, a miscarriage, or who knows what had taken place. But she was now suffering for 12 years. That family she had grown up with now was keeping her at arm's length. If she had been married, more than likely, she had been divorced by this point. This affected every moment of her life and everything that she had. She had given to doctor after doctor after doctor and gotten no answer and gotten no better. In fact, she grew worse. This woman was suffering greatly. Greatly suffering. She had nobody to go to Jesus. Nobody to show up on her account and say, "Jesus, once you get done with her, once you get done with Jairus and his big standing and his little girl, once you finish with her, can you come over and help my wife or my daughter and heal her, because she has been suffering for 12 years." No, instead, she had received judgment. What did you do to deserve such a punishment from the Lord? What did you do to bring upon yourself this? She had no one to come before Jesus on her behalf. She was suffering. She was an outcast, unable to participate in society. But something that we know about this woman is that she was a woman of great faith and a woman of great knowledge. Now, why do I say that? Why do I say she was both a woman of great faith and a woman of great knowledge? This is not part of the chain reference. This is for free. Turn over, if you would, to Malachi chapter 4. Notice I don't have the chains on the side. Not a chain reference, just for free. In Malachi chapter 4 and verse 2, it says, "But for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in its wings, and you shall go out leaping like a calf from the stall." Now you look at that and you go, "Okay, Michael, what does that have to do with anything?" When she said, "All I have to do is reach out and touch his garment," what she's actually saying is, all I have to do is touch his tassels. Now, if you think like I do, and you're very linear in your thinking, and you're very logical in your thinking, God likes to play jokes on you like this. I want you to wear a round garment and put 4 tassels on its corners. How do you put 4 tassels on a corner of a garment that's round? But anyway, I digress. The tassels that are on the garments of the Jews were a reminder of their holiness, of who God is, of their commitment. They were also referred to as wings. And this woman knew the Scriptures, knew Malachi, believed this to be the Messiah. And she says, if I could just touch his wings, if I could just touch his tassels, there is healing in his wings, and I could leap like a calf out of the stall. She didn't have the courage, the personal confidence to raise her hand and say, I'm unclean, Lord, but would you make me clean? She had nobody to go to Jesus on her behalf. Instead, she wiggled her way through this tight crowd and reached out and touched his garment, grabbed a hold of his tassels, because she knew that there was healing in his wings. She knew the Scriptures, and she had great faith, despite the fact that life had beat her down again and again and again. She reached out in great faith, knowing that there was healing in his wings. And the moment that she touched those tassels, she knew that she'd been healed. But does Jesus care? We know he has the power. But does Jesus care? Look at what happens next, starting in verse 30. Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, he immediately turned about in the crowd and said, who touched my garment? And the disciples said to him, you see the crowd pressing in around you? How can you say, who touched me? He looked around to see who had done it, but the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. Why did Jesus take the time to stop and talk to this woman? Why bring attention to her? Jesus is in a rush to an important man's house to heal a small girl of 12 years old who is on her deathbed. Why stop and call attention to a woman who doesn't want attention, who's been taken care of, and he's able to just continue about his business? Being in a house of two sets of twins, I'm constantly on the move. There is always something to be done and more things to be done than I have time for. And if you meet me up here at the building, you'll find me running about like a chicken with my head cut off, or you find me at home, I'll be doing the same. If I can accomplish something and not have to break my stride to do it, I will do it in a heartbeat. And yet here Jesus is on a mission, and somebody touches his robe, and he says, who touched me? Why does he stop to talk to her? Because of compassion. Because of compassion. She had been beaten down for 12 years. She had nobody. She did not even have the confidence to raise her hand in the crowd and say, I need you too, Jesus. But she had the faith. And Jesus, knowing all of these things, did not want her to walk around for the rest of her life knowing that she had eluded Jesus and somehow stolen a gift. No. She was worthy of the Master's time. She was worthy of the Master's time. She was worthy to ask for what she had been freely given. There is healing in telling one's story. So much of counseling is simply being allowed freely to talk, to share your perspective without judgment, without argument, to simply talk. So many counselors could simply be put out of business if we would just have some good friends who would listen to us and not try to be Job's friends and give us advice. If we could just listen with acceptance, we'd all be a lot better off mentally. There is health in telling our story, and Jesus allowed this woman the opportunity to tell her story. She didn't need to hide in the shadows. She didn't need to be ashamed. He longed to give her freely the gift of healing that she desperately desired after suffering no fault of her own for 12 years. As an outcast, as a member of society who of great faith was suffering, and no one could help her. And Jesus stops the crowd and says, "Who touched me?" Not because he didn't know, not because he was against being touched, but because he wanted to hear her story and to tell her that she mattered, to restore her dignity, and to send her on her way in peace. But this story isn't over, because there's still a 12-year-old girl who's suffering. Picking up the story here in verse 35. While he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house someone who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they had said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." Only believe. He would not allow anyone to follow him except Peter and James and John and the brother of James. And they came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion of people wailing and weeping loudly. One of the first things I need to say here is don't compare pain. It does nobody any good. I remember sitting in a preaching class, one of my professors, I had made a comment about how Job's suffering was so much beyond anything we could experience. And his first comment was, don't compare suffering. Suffering is suffering. Who's suffering more? Who is worthy of Jesus' time more? Couldn't Jesus have circled back around and dealt with this woman? Why allow this man who was in fear of his daughter's life to experience the pain of loss? Why wait? Don't compare pain. Suffering is suffering. One woman was suffering for 12 years, and one man, the love of his life of 12 years has passed. Don't compare pain. It does nobody any good. There's no benefit in it. Pain is pain. Suffering is suffering. There's no benefit in comparing and contrasting. They're suffering. And Jesus meets them in that pain, and he walks alongside them in their pain. We're uncomfortable with pain. We're uncomfortable with people who are suffering. We don't know how to deal with that. But isn't that life? Don't we all go to the house of mourning? Don't we all suffer? Don't we all find ourselves sick? Some of us are blessed not to consistently live there. But don't we all experience that? And in those moments, don't we just desire somebody to be present with us in that moment of pain and suffering? To walk with us. But I don't know what to say, Michael. Good. Don't say anything. Be present. Don't go with any of the tropes. Oh, God just wanted them more than you did. It's better this way. It was the Lord's will. No, God doesn't want anyone to suffer. Death is the last enemy to be defeated. Sickness is second to last. Jesus meets this man where he is at, and he gives him comfort. He gives him hope, and he walks with him in his pain. But notice how Jesus addresses such pain and suffering. In verse 39, when he had entered, he said to them, "Why are you making such a commotion and weeping? The child's not dead, but asleep." They laughed at him, but he put them all outside, and he took the child and his father and mother, and those who were with him, and they went to where the child was. And taking her by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome by amazement. And he strictly warned them and charged that no one should know about this, but told them to give her something to eat. She's hungry. Let her eat. Every time we see Jesus in the Gospels interact with death, he cannot help but stop it. He would make a really bad Baptist. Right? You don't mess with a good funeral. Right? But Jesus, every time he goes in and runs into a funeral procession or somebody who is dead, he cannot help himself but to stop it and send everybody home in joy. Because that enemy of death is one he cannot stand to allow to be victorious. Jesus begins by meeting this family in their pain. He puts aside those who are just adding to the commotion, adding to the drama, and he exists with them in that pain. He doesn't offer tropes, but he offers what he can. And Jesus being Jesus, what he can offer is life. And he gives this girl back her life. Not because he wants publicity, for he tells them, don't tell anybody what's happened here. Just give the girl something to eat. So we're left with this question. Who is Jesus? Who is Jesus? Can he help? Well, he's calmed the storm when all the weathermen can say is there's a 90% chance that it's currently raining. He makes the storm leave. And when the demon-possessed man in a life who is in complete disarray and no one can do anything but bind him, and even that doesn't work, walks into Jesus' life. Jesus says, be free from your illness. Be free from this bondage. Go in peace. Tell others what the Lord has done for you. When a woman who has suffered for 12 years and all the doctors have done is make things worse, he heals her. And a little girl who is sick and then dies, he gives her life back to her and her health back to her. I would say Jesus can indeed help in the storms of life and the difficulties that we go through. Jesus can help. And in looking at this simple question, does he care? I don't know if we can compete with the compassion of Jesus meeting people where they are. In all of those situations. As the disciples come and say, do you care that we drowned? And Jesus says, peace be still. Jesus cares. He wants to hear your story. He wants to bring you healing. He wants to set you free. So my challenge to you this morning as we continue to wrestle with Jesus is to go and share what you know. Pick up these different bookmarks and commit to study with people what you've learned. Whether it be a brother or sister here within the congregation or somebody you work with and somebody who knows nothing of Christ, just sit down and say, you know what? I'm struck by these stories, by this person of Jesus. I'm challenged by him. Can I share with you what I have been learning in church? Sit down and study with them. Share that story with them. And allow the person of Jesus to make the impact upon their life, because I can't make that impact, but he can. I can't save anybody. I can't convince anybody, but Jesus, wow. What he's able to do and his compassion does not compare. So go and tell others. And come and know Christ.